Have you ever loved someone so completely, so deeply, so desperately, that you moved mountains to be with them, only to realize years later that they never really saw you at all? Not saw you across a room. I mean, really saw you. The effort you put in, the meals you cooked, the way you dressed up just for them, the way you swallowed your tears and kept smiling because you told yourself, he's just quiet. He's just tired. He loves me in his own way. Yeah, that kind. And hey, before we dive in, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city, your state, your country in the comments. I genuinely love knowing where my people are. Whether you're in New York, Texas, California, London, or somewhere halfway across the world, welcome. Pull up a seat. Because this story, it's going to hit close to home. My name is Sarah, and this is my story. I grew up in a good family. Solid, middle-class American household in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. My dad had a steady job in finance. My mom ran our home like a queen. Everything clean, dinner always on the table, Sundays reserved for church and family. We weren't rich by any stretch, but we had reputation. We had standing in the community. People respected the Carter name, and my parents made sure we knew what that meant. I was the oldest of 3 girls. Smart, driven, the kind of daughter that made her parents proud without even trying too hard. I went to a good college, studied business administration, graduated with honors. I had a plan. I had a path. And then I met Harper. Harper Reed was nothing like the men my mother had quietly been hoping I'd bring home. He wasn't from Charlotte. He wasn't from any city, really. He was from a small town about 4 hours east, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the diner on Main Street has been owned by the same family for 3 generations, and where ambition sometimes feels like a foreign language. But Harper had charm. He had this smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had this way of listening to you, really listening, like every word you said mattered more than anything else happening in the world. He was gentle. He was warm. He was dedicated. We met through a mutual friend at a birthday party when I was 26. He was 26 too. He'd just moved to Charlotte looking for work, staying with a cousin, trying to figure out his next step. He didn't have a job yet. He didn't have much of anything, really. But what he had, and I felt it from the very first night, was a love so loud and so present that it made everything else feel small. He texted me before I even got home that night. I know this might be too soon, but I just wanted to say, I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. I hope we can do it again. I smiled at my phone for 10 minutes straight. We dated for almost 2 years. And those 2 years were the most loved I have ever felt in my entire life. Harper made me his first priority. No questions asked, no hesitation. If I called, he answered. If I needed him, he showed up. He planned little surprises, not expensive ones because money was still tight for him, but thoughtful ones. A handwritten note tucked into my bag. A playlist he made of songs that reminded him of me. Showing up at my office with lunch because I'd mentioned in passing that I'd been too busy to eat. He wasn't working steadily yet, but he was trying. He was applying everywhere, picking up odd jobs, hustling. And through all of that uncertainty, his love for me never wavered. If anything, it only grew louder. But my family? They had opinions. My mother was the first to say it out loud. Sarah, he doesn't have a job. He doesn't have stability. He comes from nothing. What kind of future are you building with a man like that? My dad was quieter about it, but I could see it in his eyes every time Harper came to the house. That polite, tight-lipped smile that said, I'm tolerating this because you're my daughter, but don't push me. My aunts whispered at family dinners. My grandmother, God bless her, pulled me aside at Thanksgiving and said, Baby, love is beautiful, but love don't pay the mortgage. And here's the thing, they weren't entirely wrong. I knew that. I'm not naive. I understood the practical concerns. But what they didn't understand, what none of them could seem to see, was the quality of this man's character. His loyalty, his patience, the way he treated me not as someone to be managed or tolerated, but as someone to be cherished. So I made a decision. I fought for us. I had long, painful conversations with my parents. I brought Harper to dinners and made him show up as his best self. I laid out a plan, our plan, for how we were going to build a life together. I cried. I argued. I held my ground. And eventually, slowly, reluctantly, both families came around. We got married on a warm Saturday in October. Simple ceremony, beautiful day. I wore my mother's veil. Harper cried when he saw me walk down the aisle. My dad shook his hand like he meant it for the first time. Alhamdulillah, as they say. Thank God. I thought the hard part was over. I had no idea it was only just beginning. After the wedding, life settled into a shape that looked, from the outside, pretty reasonable. I landed a good job, great job, actually, at a financial consulting firm just 15 minutes from my parents' house in Charlotte. My salary was solid. My benefits were solid. My boss liked me. I was good at what I did, and I knew it. Because Harper's work situation was still unpredictable. He'd picked up a steady position back in his hometown doing operations work for a logistics company. We made a decision early on that I would stay in Charlotte, close to my job and my family, while he commuted back and forth. It wasn't ideal, but it was practical. His family had no issue with it. My family had no issue with it. On paper, it made sense. So I moved back into my childhood home temporarily, just until we figured out a more permanent situation. Harper's family was 4 hours away. We told ourselves it was temporary. That was 8 years ago. The temporary arrangement became our life. Harper came to Charlotte about 3 times every 2 months. Each visit lasted around 2 days, sometimes less if work called him back early. 2 days out of every 3 weeks or so. That was my marriage. Now, I want you to understand something before you judge the arrangement itself. I'm not here to say long-distance marriages can't work. I know couples who make it work beautifully. The key, the absolute key, is intentionality. It's making the time you do have count. It's showing up emotionally even when you can't show up physically. It's wanting your partner to feel loved, even across the miles. Harper? He was physically present 2 days every few weeks. But emotionally, he checked out somewhere along the way. And I can't even tell you exactly when it happened. That's the scariest part. There was no big fight. No dramatic moment. No affair, no betrayal, nothing I could point to and say that's when it changed. It just faded. Quietly. Like a light being slowly dimmed until one day you look up and realize the room is nearly dark. And I tried. Lord, I tried. Those 2 days when Harper came to visit, I treated them like events. Like occasions. Like something to prepare for and celebrate. I would wake up early the morning he was due to arrive and go all out in that kitchen. We're talking 10, 12 different breakfast dishes spread across the table. Scrambled eggs with herbs, fresh fruit cut into little shapes, homemade biscuits, sausage, yogurt parfaits, pancakes stacked high, the works. I'd set the table beautifully. Put on music. Make the house smell like warmth and welcome. I'd dress myself carefully. Put on something pretty, do my hair. Sometimes wear a sari because I knew he'd always admired that look. I'd lay out his clothes for him, help him get dressed. Fuss over him the way you fuss over someone you love and want to feel seen. And Harper would sit down at that table, eat his breakfast, and say nothing. Not a compliment. Not a "this is amazing, babe." Not a "you look beautiful today." Not even a casual "thanks for doing all this." Just silence. And here's what made it worse. If I didn't do all those things, he didn't complain about that either. He didn't notice the difference. The effort and the absence of effort produced the same response from him. Nothing. Do you know how demoralizing that is? To work that hard to make someone feel special, and to get back nothing? No feedback, no appreciation, no acknowledgement. Not even disappointment when it's gone. It makes you start to wonder, does he even notice me at all? I started talking to my best friend Denise about it. Denise had known me since we were 11 years old. She was the kind of friend who told you the truth even when the truth was uncomfortable. "Sarah," she said one night when we were sitting on my parents' back porch splitting a bottle of wine. "Has he always been like this? Or is this new?" I thought about it for a long time. "He was different before," I finally said. "Before we got married, he was different. He was so present. So expressive. He made me feel like I was everything. And now," I looked out at the yard. At the oak tree my dad planted the year I was born. At the fireflies just starting to flicker in the summer dark. "Now," I said, "I feel like I'm furniture. I'm just there. In the background. Useful when needed. Otherwise just part of the scenery." Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You deserve more than that, Sarah." I knew she was right. I just didn't know what to do about it yet. When I found out I was pregnant, I cried for an hour straight. Happy tears. The best kind. I was 35 years old, we'd been married for nearly 7 years, and this baby, this little miracle, felt like a second chance. A new chapter. A reason for everything to finally click into place. In both our families, on my side and on Harper's side, this was the first grandchild, the first niece or nephew, the first baby of the next generation. It was a big deal. My mother started knitting the week I told her. My aunts showed up with casseroles and baby name books. My dad, my stoic, tight-lipped dad, actually teared up when I told him. He hugged me for a long time and didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I was glowing. I was emotional and exhausted and a little scared, but mostly I was over the moon. I started reading every book I could find. I downloaded apps that told me what size fruit my baby was each week. I set up a little corner of my room as a future nursery and spent evenings scrolling through Pinterest boards of soft yellows and sage greens. And Harper? When I told him over video call, because he was back in his hometown, of course, his response was, "Oh, okay, that's good. That was it. Oh, okay, that's good." I waited for more. I stayed on the call, smiling, heart hammering, expecting something, excitement, happy shock, laughter, something. He asked a couple of basic questions. When was I due? How was I feeling? And then said he had to get back to something and would call me later. He didn't call me later. I cried myself to sleep that night. As the pregnancy progressed, I kept hoping he'd warm up to it, that the reality of becoming a father would sink in and something would shift in him, that he'd start calling more to check in, that he'd start asking questions, what the doctor said, how the baby was growing, whether I was eating enough, whether my back hurt, whether I was scared. Instead, when I needed to go to a doctor's appointment, and there were many because pregnancy is not a simple thing, Harper would send me. He'd arrange for me to get there. He'd make sure I had money for it if I needed. But he never asked what the doctor said. Not once did he call after an appointment and say, "Hey, how'd it go? What did they tell you? Is everything okay?" Not once did he say, "You should be eating more of this," or "I read that this is good for the baby," or "I'm thinking about the future. I want to set up a savings account for them." He never surprised me during the pregnancy. No flowers showing up at the door. No unexpected visit just to check on me and the baby. No letter, no card, no voice message saying, "I'm proud of you. I'm excited. I love you both." Nothing. And the thought that kept me up at night, the one that scared me more than anything else, was this. When this baby is born and we're in that hospital room surrounded by family, is he going to hold our child? Is he going to beam with pride? Or is he going to sit in the corner, quiet and distant, while everyone else celebrates a life that he helped create? Is he going to be there, truly there, for our child? Or is he going to be the same man he's been for years now? Physically present when required, emotionally absent always? That question kept me up more nights than I can count. Here's what made everything so confusing. And this is the part that I think a lot of women will recognize. Harper was never cruel to me. He was never dismissive in an obvious, aggressive way. He never belittled me or criticized me or made me feel stupid. He didn't cheat. He didn't lie. He didn't gamble away money or come home drunk or pick fights. In 10 years of marriage, he never once found fault with me. Whatever I said, he accepted. Whatever I served him, he ate. Whatever decision I made, he backed me up. If I complained about something he did, he would apologize. Not once, not twice, 1,000 times. He'd say sorry until I had nothing left to be angry about. And somehow that made it worse. Because how do you fight with someone who never fights back? How do you demand more from someone who never demands anything? How do you explain to people, to your mother, to your friends, to yourself, that you're unhappy in a marriage where your husband is technically fine? He doesn't hit you? No. He doesn't cheat? No. He provides for you? As much as he can, yes. He's respectful? Always. So then what's the problem, Sarah? The problem is invisibility. The problem is existing inside a marriage and feeling like you don't matter. The problem is doing everything right, being a loving wife, a devoted partner, a woman who wakes up and chooses her husband every single day, and getting back a wall of polite, pleasant, total indifference. The problem is that somewhere in the last 10 years, my husband stopped being excited to be married to me. And I don't know how to fix something I can't even name. My cousin Renee, sharper than a tack and twice as blunt, came to stay with us for a weekend when Harper happened to be visiting. She sat across from him at dinner, watched him eat in silence while I talked and laughed and tried to fill the space, and afterward, when he'd gone to bed, she pulled me into the kitchen and looked me dead in the eye. "Sarah, what is going on with him?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, he barely said 10 words at dinner. You were working so hard to make conversation, and he just sat there, like a prop. I started washing dishes, so I had somewhere to look." "He's quiet," I said. "He's always been quiet." "No, Renee said, and her voice was firm but kind. Quiet is one thing. Checked out is another. That man is not with you, Sarah. His body is here. His spirit is somewhere else entirely. I didn't respond. I just kept washing dishes. Do you talk to him about it? I try. Anne, he apologizes. He says he'll do better. And then nothing changes. Renee was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that I've thought about almost every day since. The saddest kind of loneliness, she said, is the kind you feel inside your own marriage. She wasn't wrong. That's exactly what it was. Loneliness inside a marriage. Loneliness with a husband who was loyal and kind and present enough to technically count, but who had somehow, somewhere along the way, stopped showing up for me in the ways that actually mattered. I had financial independence. I was earning my own money, managing my own expenses, building my own career. I had family around me, my parents, my sisters, cousins, and aunts who loved me fiercely. I had a baby on the way. I had so many things to be grateful for. And yet I lay in bed at night, in my childhood bedroom that had been repainted for my married life, and I felt profoundly, achingly alone. I was starting to lose myself. Not in a dramatic way. Not all at once. But piece by piece, the way a coastline erodes. Every unanswered gesture, every silent meal, every unacknowledged effort. It carved away a little more of the woman I used to be. The confident, bright-eyed girl who had fought so hard for this love. Who had stood up to her entire family. Who had believed, with her whole heart, that she was choosing right. I'd started to wonder if I had. The turning point came on a Tuesday in February. I was 7 months pregnant, tired in a way that lived in my bones, and I'd had a particularly difficult day at work. I came home to my parents' house, changed into something comfortable, and sat down to call Harper. He didn't answer. I called again 20 minutes later. Still no answer. I texted, "Hey, just wanted to talk. Had a rough day. Call me when you can." He responded 3 hours later. "Sorry, was busy. You okay?" And that was it. No call. No, what happened? Tell me about it. No, I'm sorry you had a hard day. I wish I was there. Just sorry, was busy. You okay? I stared at that text for a long time. And something shifted in me. Something quiet and deep, like a door closing very softly in a room at the back of my heart. Not a slam. Not a dramatic moment. Just a gentle, final click. I thought about the 10 years. I thought about the breakfasts. I thought about the saris and the carefully chosen outfits and the dinners I'd made and the stories I'd told and the laughter I'd performed to fill his silence. I thought about carrying our first child, the first child in both our families, while he called it okay. That's good. I thought about how hard I had fought to have this man in my life. And I thought about how little fighting he seemed to be doing now to keep me in his. I didn't cry that night. I'd cried enough. Instead, I got out a journal, a real one, pen and paper, and I started writing. I wrote down everything. Every feeling I'd been swallowing for years. Every moment I'd minimized because I was afraid of being called demanding. Every time I'd told myself he loves me in his own way as a way to excuse behavior that was slowly breaking me down. I wrote for 2 hours. And when I was done, I read it back to myself. And I finally admitted the truth I'd been running from. This is not the marriage I deserve. And if nothing changes, I am going to disappear completely inside it. I waited until Harper's next visit to have the conversation. I didn't want to do it over the phone. Some things need to happen face to face. He arrived on a Friday evening, same as usual. I made dinner. A simple one this time, not the elaborate production I usually staged. Just a warm meal on the table, candles lit, the TV off. He seemed slightly surprised by the quiet. We ate together. Small talk. How was the drive? How's his mom? How's my back feeling? And then, when the plates were cleared and we were sitting across from each other with nothing between us, I took a breath. Harper, I need to talk to you about something important. And I need you to really listen. Not just hear me, but actually listen. He looked at me. Something in my tone made him still. Okay, he said. I am lonely, I said. I am lonely inside our marriage. And I have been for a long time. The words landed in the room like something heavy being set down. He didn't immediately apologize this time. He just looked at me. I know you're not a bad man, I continued. I know you're faithful. I know you're kind. And I know you love me in whatever way you know how to love someone. But Harper, I need more than faithful and kind and technically present. I need a partner. I need someone who is excited about our life together. I need someone who notices when I put in effort. I need someone who asks me how my doctor's appointment went. I need someone who is thrilled that we're having a baby, the first baby in both our families, and shows it. He was very quiet. I have been trying, I said, and my voice stayed steady even though everything inside me was trembling, to make our 2 days together feel like a full life. I have been doing everything I can think of to make you feel celebrated. And I get nothing back. Not a compliment, not a word of appreciation, not a single surprise or gesture that tells me you see me. And I can't keep going like this. I am going to lose myself. I am losing myself. Long silence. Then Harper said quietly, "I'm sorry." And there it was. The 1,000 times sorry. Right on schedule. But this time I was ready. "I don't want sorry," I said. "I've had sorry for 10 years. I want to know, do you want this marriage? Do you want me? Do you want our child? Because if you do, then we need to change things. Fundamentally. Not just for a week, not just because I brought it up. We need to actually change. And if you don't, if this is just not something you're capable of, then I need to know that too. So I can figure out what my life looks like." He looked at me for a long time. And then something happened that I hadn't expected. His eyes filled with tears. I want to pause here for a second. Because if you'd asked me before that Friday night what Harper would do when I finally said everything out loud, when I laid it all bare on that dinner table with no softening, no sugarcoating, no, "But I know you're trying, baby," cushioning the blow, I would have told you he'd apologize. Quietly, politely, the way he always did. I would have told you he'd say sorry and mean it, and then change absolutely nothing, the way he always did. What I did not expect, what I was genuinely not prepared for, was for Harper Reed to put his face in his hands at my kitchen table and cry. Not a polite little eye-watering. Not a dignified single tear tracking down a strong jaw. I mean cry. The kind that comes from somewhere deep. The kind that's been locked up so long that when it finally breaks out, it breaks out with everything attached to it. Sound and shaking and years of something that was never supposed to be held that long. I sat very still. I didn't rush to comfort him. That was new for me. Normally I would have been around that table in 2 seconds, hand on his back. Hey, it's okay. I didn't mean to upset you." Normally I would have swallowed my own pain to manage his discomfort. Not this time. This time I let him feel it. I sat with my hands folded on the table, and I waited. And when he finally looked up at me, eyes red, face open in a way I hadn't seen in years, he said something I had never once heard him say in 10 years of marriage. "I don't know how to be what you need me to be." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" I said. He wiped his face, took a breath, and then slowly, haltingly, like a man feeling his way through a dark room, he started to talk. What came out over the next 2 hours was not a single dramatic revelation. It wasn't one big secret, one obvious explanation, one clear villain in the story. It was messier than that, more human than that. Harper told me that growing up, his family didn't show love out loud. His father was a quiet man, a good man, he emphasized, a hard-working, faithful man, but not a man who expressed things. You knew he loved you because he came home every night and the light stayed on and food stayed on the table. That was the language, presence and provision. That was what love looked like in his household. Compliments, he said, felt foreign to him. Not because he didn't feel them. He felt them constantly, he said. He noticed everything. He noticed when I dressed up. He noticed the breakfasts. He noticed the effort every single time. But saying it out loud felt, he struggled for the word, exposed. Vulnerable in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Like cracking open a part of himself he didn't know how to protect afterward. I listened. He told me that when we first got together, when he was showing up with playlists and notes and all that early relationship expressiveness, part of what was driving that was fear. Fear of losing me. Fear that if he didn't work hard enough, I'd choose one of the men my family had in mind for me. Someone with a better resume, a better zip code, a better future already built. The effort, he admitted quietly, had come partly from insecurity, from needing to prove himself. And once we were married, once the proving was done, the insecurity quieted down. And so did the expression. "I didn't realize," he said, "that you still needed me to say it. I thought you knew." I looked at him for a long time. "Harper," I said slowly, "knowing is not the same as feeling it. I can know you love me. I can know the sky is blue. Knowing doesn't keep me warm. Knowing doesn't make me feel seen. Knowing doesn't help me through the nights when I'm here alone, pregnant with our first child, and wondering if you even care that you're going to be someone's father." He flinched like I'd touched something hot. I care, he said. I care more than I know how to say. Then learn how to say it, I told him. Because I am not going to spend the rest of my life translating your silence into love. I don't have that much energy left. We talked until midnight. It wasn't a magical conversation that fixed everything. I want to be honest about that. There was no movie moment where the music swelled, and he swept me into his arms and said all the perfect words, and I melted and everything was healed. That's not how real life works. That's not how deep, long-standing emotional patterns get unwound. But something was different. For the first time in years, Harper was present in a conversation with me. He was uncomfortable and awkward and clearly operating outside his comfort zone. But he stayed. He didn't shut down, didn't retreat behind a wall of apology and silence. He pushed through. And at the end of it, he reached across the table and took my hand. I don't want to lose you, he said. I don't want to lose us. I know I've been failing you. I know I've been failing our baby before they're even born. And I don't have good excuses. I want to try. Differently. For real this time. I looked at his hand on mine. I need you to understand something, I said. I have been patient for 10 years. I'm not built for infinite patience, Harper. If we try, and I mean really try, with counseling and honesty and actual change, and nothing shifts, I will have to make a different choice. Not to punish you, but because I refuse to watch myself disappear. He nodded. I understand, he said. And for the first time in a very long time, I believed him. Our daughter was born on a Thursday in April, 6 pounds 11 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and a cry so fierce and certain that the whole delivery room laughed. I named her Amara. It means grace in several languages and eternal in others. Both felt right. Harper was there. He'd taken the week off work. The first time he'd ever taken a full week to be with me for anything. And he was in that room when she came into the world. He cut the cord. He held her first before almost anyone else, and I watched his face from that hospital bed, exhausted and overwhelmed and running on pure love and adrenaline. And I saw something in his expression that I hadn't seen in a very long time. Wonder. Pure, undone, defenseless wonder. He held Amara against his chest and looked down at her like she was the most extraordinary thing that had ever happened to him. And then he looked up at me, and his eyes were bright with tears he wasn't even trying to stop, and he said, Sarah, look what we made. And I cried. Of course I cried. Because for all the pain of the last few years, for all the loneliness and the invisible effort and the silent dinners, this was real. This was ours. This little person with her fierce cry and her dark hair, she was the proof that we had chosen each other, that something between us had created something extraordinary. The hospital room filled up that afternoon. My mother came first, crying before she even got through the door. My dad came in quiet and reverent, like he was walking into church, and held Amara for a long time without saying a word. My sisters came, and Denise, and a stream of aunts and cousins. From Harper's side, his mother made the 4-hour drive and arrived with red eyes and trembling hands, reaching for her granddaughter with a love so visible it broke your heart open. Both families. In one room. Around one tiny, perfect person. For a few hours, everything was good. But here's where I have to be honest with you, because this story isn't just about a beautiful birth moment. It doesn't end in the hospital room. Real life rarely does. In the weeks that followed, Harper tried. He genuinely tried. He stayed longer than his usual 2 days. He called more. He asked how Amara was, how I was, how my recovery was going. He made small gestures, brought flowers once, which stunned me so thoroughly that I made him stand in the doorway for an extra moment while I processed it. He held Amara in public without needing to be asked. He showed her off to his family on video calls with an unmistakable pride. It wasn't perfect. The changes were imperfect and sometimes awkward, and occasionally he slipped back into old silence like a man stepping accidentally into a familiar puddle. But the effort was visible, and the effort mattered. And here's what I discovered about myself in those weeks. I had been so depleted, so hollowed out by years of invisible effort and unanswered need, that even small gestures felt enormous. A compliment he offered at breakfast. That was really good, Sarah. Landed on me like sunlight after a long winter. Not because the compliment itself was anything extraordinary, but because the silence had lasted so long that any sound was deafening in comparison. I started going to therapy. Not couples counseling yet, just me, on my own, working through everything that had accumulated. My therapist was a woman named Dr. Anita Coleman, warm and perceptive, The kind of person who had a gift for identifying the exact thing you'd been avoiding looking at and setting it directly in front of you. In our second session, she asked me, "Sarah, what did you believe would happen if you asked for what you needed from your husband?" I thought about it for a while. I said slowly, I believed he would find me too much, too demanding, and leave. And so instead, she said, you made yourself smaller. You worked harder and asked for less. And called it love. I sat with that for a long time. Yes, I finally said. That's exactly what I did. And how did that work out for you? I laughed, a short, rueful sound. Not great. She smiled. Asking for what you need is not demanding. It is the foundation of any healthy relationship. The trouble is, many of us were never taught that. We were taught that a good woman makes do. Adjusts. Accepts. And when she's unhappy, she tries harder. Not differently, just harder. Do more. Give more. Shrink more. And when that doesn't work, she blames herself for not doing enough. I wiped my eyes. I've been doing that, I said. For years. I know, she said gently. And it stops now. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. Because there is a specific kind of satisfaction. The kind you don't talk about loudly. The kind you feel quietly in your chest late at night. That comes from watching the people who doubted you slowly, reluctantly, realize they were wrong. Remember my family? The aunts who whispered at Thanksgiving. The grandmother who told me love didn't pay the mortgage. My mother with her tight, worried practicality. My dad with his polite, loaded silence. They had all watched me fight for Harper. Watched me stand up and argue and plead and convince and choose him against everyone's advice. And while they'd come around enough to attend the wedding and make peace on the surface, underneath, I had always known they were waiting. Waiting to see if they'd been right. Waiting for the moment when the choice I'd made out of love would crack under the weight of real life and prove that caution was wiser than the heart. And for a long time, watching my marriage from the outside, they might have thought that moment was coming. They saw me living in my childhood home for years. They saw Harper visiting like a guest, polite, brief, emotionally remote. They saw me working hard, raising our daughter increasingly solo during the week, building a career, managing everything. They were watching. But here's what they also saw, whether they acknowledged it consciously or not. They saw me thriving. Not in spite of the difficulty. Through it. Partly because of it. Because the years of fighting for myself, learning to name my needs, learning to ask for what I deserved, learning not to disappear, had made me stronger than I would have been if everything had simply been easy. I had a career that I'd built on my own merits. I had financial independence that was entirely mine. I had a daughter I was raising with intention and joy and all the love that had been accumulating in me, looking for somewhere to go. And I had a marriage that was slowly and imperfectly and with a lot of effort from both people, beginning to actually be a marriage. My mother was the first to come around. She wasn't someone who apologized easily. That wasn't her style. But one Sunday afternoon when she was sitting at my kitchen table watching me nurse Amara while simultaneously reviewing a work document with one hand, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "You've become someone, Sarah." It was the most my mother had ever said and the fewest words she'd ever used to say it. "I always was someone, Mama," I told her. "I just had to remember it." She nodded, looked out the window, and then reached over and patted my hand in the way she did when words weren't going to stretch far enough. My Aunt Gloria, the loudest of the Thanksgiving whisperers, the one who had told my mother, within my earshot, that I was throwing myself away on a man with nothing, came to see Amara when she was about 3 months old. She held my daughter and looked at my house and at me, put together, confident, clearly running my life with competence and intention, and said a little grudgingly, "Well, you've done all right." High praise from Gloria. Genuinely. "Thank you," I said pleasantly. I know a lot of people weren't sure I would. She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "We just worried," she said. "I know," I said. "But worry isn't the same as faith. And I needed people to have faith in me." She didn't have a response to that. That was fine. She didn't need one. From Harper's family, the shifts were subtler but no less meaningful. His mother, a woman I'll call Miss Evelyn, because that's what everyone called her, a small, soft-spoken woman who had spent her whole life making herself quiet and useful in the background, came to stay with us for 2 weeks when Amara was born. Miss Evelyn and I had always had a cordial relationship, respectful but careful. We'd never been close. The distance between our families geographically and socially had kept a natural buffer between us. But those 2 weeks in close quarters, doing the exhausting communal work of caring for a newborn, broke the buffer down. She was in my kitchen one morning, early, before anyone else was up. I came downstairs at 5 a.m. for a feeding and found her standing at the window with a cup of tea, looking out at the quiet street. She heard me and turned, and something about the hour and the stillness made the usual careful politeness drop. "You're a strong woman, Sarah," she said simply. "I had to be," I said. She nodded slowly. Looked back at the window. "My son," she said quietly. "He learned to be silent from watching his father. And his father learned it from watching his father. It's been going on so long none of them know it's a choice anymore. They think that's just how men are." I sat down at the kitchen table. "Is that an excuse?" I asked, not unkindly. "No," she said. "It's an explanation. Those aren't the same thing." She paused. "I'm glad you pushed him. I'm glad you didn't just accept it." "For a long time I did accept it," I admitted. "But you stopped," she said. "That's what matters." We sat in the early morning quiet for a while. Just two women who loved the same difficult man, who had each navigated him in different ways. It was the closest I had ever felt to Miss Evelyn. When she left at the end of her 2 weeks, she hugged me at the door, a long, real hug, and whispered, "Take care of yourself first. Everything else comes from that." I thought about that for weeks afterward. 6 months after Amara was born, Harper and I started couples counseling. This was not an easy thing to arrange. The logistics alone, him 4 hours away, me with an infant, both of us with demanding work schedules, made it feel almost impossible. But we made it work with video sessions and occasional in-person sessions when he was visiting, with a therapist named Dr. James Whitfield who had a direct, no-nonsense approach that suited us both. Harper was uncomfortable at first. He sat in those early sessions like a man waiting to be found guilty of something, braced and guarded. Dr. Whitfield didn't coddle him, but he didn't prosecute him either. He simply asked honest questions and sat patiently in the silence while Harper decided whether to answer them honestly. Slowly, Harper answered honestly. And what came out was not a story of a man who didn't care. It was the story of a man who cared enormously and had no map for how to show it. A man who had built such a high wall between his internal world and his external expression that he had forgotten it was a wall at all. He thought it was just how he was built. He thought everyone experienced love as something you held rather than something you gave. Dr. Whitfield said something in one of our sessions that I've never forgotten. "Love is not a feeling that lives inside you, Harper. Love is an action that travels between people. If it never travels, if it stays inside, the other person cannot receive it. And a love that cannot be received is, for all practical purposes, incomplete." Harper was quiet for a long time after that. Then he said, "I've been keeping it inside for 38 years. "I know," Dr. Whitfield said. "And Sarah has been standing outside waiting for it to arrive for 10 of them." Harper looked at me. "I'm sorry," he said. And this time it was different. Not the reflex apology. Not the 1,000 automatic sorries he'd deployed over the years. This was something cracked open and real. Something that cost him something. I reached across and took his hand. "I know," I said. "Now let's figure out what comes next." What came next was slow and real, and sometimes frustrating, and occasionally beautiful. Harper started calling every evening. Not long calls always, sometimes just 10 minutes, just checking in, just present across the distance. He started asking specific questions. Not "you okay?" But "how was that meeting you were nervous about?" And "how's Amara's sleep been this week?" And "are you eating enough? You sounded tired yesterday." He started sending things. Small things. A grocery delivery when I mentioned I hadn't had time to shop. A card that arrived in the mail for no occasion, just because. A voicemail once, left at 11 p.m., that simply said, "I was thinking about how hard you work. And how proud I am of you. That's all. Good night." I listened to that voicemail 7 times. He wasn't transformed overnight into some perfectly expressive romantic hero. That's not real life. He still slipped. There were still visits that felt quieter than I needed them to be. Still moments where I had to nudge him, remind him, ask for the thing I needed instead of waiting for him to offer it. We were both still learning new patterns over old ones, and old patterns are stubborn. But the direction was right. And the direction being right, I was learning, is everything. I want to talk about revenge for a minute, because I know that word is in the title of this story, and I know what your mind probably went to when you heard it. You probably imagined something dramatic, some confrontation, Some public reckoning where everyone who had doubted me or failed me was forced to witness my triumph while I stood there looking flawless and victorious. Some version of I told you so delivered with perfect composure and devastating effect. And look, I won't lie. There's a version of me that would have enjoyed that. The version that cried alone during her pregnancy. The version that sat across from a silent husband and wondered what was wrong with her. The version that heard her aunts whisper and her mother worry and pushed all of it down to keep the peace. Yeah, that version of me had some feelings that looked a lot like the desire for a dramatic, vindicating moment. But real life gave me something better than that. Real life gave me a version of revenge that is quieter and more permanent and honestly more satisfying than any single confrontation could have been. Real revenge? It looked like this. It looked like Amara at 8 months old, laughing so hard at her father's face that she couldn't catch her breath, and Harper laughing right back at her, undone and delighted, all that careful emotional distance completely gone in the presence of this tiny person who required him to be present whether he was comfortable with it or not. It looked like my performance review at work. Exceptional leadership, strategic thinking, an invaluable member of the team. And the raise that came with it, and depositing that check into the investment account I'd opened in my daughter's name. It looked like my mother, sitting in my living room, watching me host a dinner for 12 people, while simultaneously managing a work call in the kitchen and nursing Amara between courses, and saying to my Aunt Gloria under her breath, thinking I couldn't hear her, "She can do anything." It looked like Miss Evelyn calling me on a random Tuesday evening just to talk. Not about Harper, not about the baby, but just to talk, because we had become something unexpected and genuine to each other. Friends. Allies. 2 women connected by love for the same man. Both of us having learned the hard way that loving someone and accepting everything from them are not the same thing. It looked like sitting across from my husband in our couple's session, both of us tired and imperfect and still very much in process, and realizing, with something that felt like peace, that I had not disappeared after all. I was still here. More here, in fact, than I'd been in years. More clear about who I was and what I needed and what I would and wouldn't accept. More honest. More whole. The woman Harper had fallen for at that birthday party 12 years ago. The bright, confident, take-no-nonsense woman who knew what she wanted and went after it. I had spent years quietly editing her out of my own story. Shrinking her. Making her more palatable, less demanding, easier to be around. Now she was back. And everyone could see it. Harper could see it. My family could see it. Denise could see it. Renee could see it. More importantly, I could see it. That was the revenge. Not a single triumphant moment. 100 small ones, accumulating every day, into a life that was actually genuinely mine. One night, when Amara was about 9 months old and finally sleeping through the night. Finally, thank God, I sat down at my kitchen table late and wrote Harper a letter. Not an email. A real letter, pen on paper. The kind you write when you want the words to mean something, when you want the physical act of writing to be part of the weight of what you're saying. I didn't plan to send it. It was for me, really, a way of processing everything that had happened and putting it somewhere outside my own head so it could stop circling. But I'll tell you what I wrote, because I think some of you need to hear it. Maybe for someone in your life. Maybe for yourself. Harper, I fell in love with you because of how you made me feel. Seen. Chosen. Like I mattered more than anything else in the world to you. And somewhere in the years that followed, I stopped feeling that. I don't think you stopped meaning it. I think you just stopped sending it. And I, out of love, out of fear, out of a deep and misguided belief that a good wife doesn't ask for too much, I stopped telling you I needed it. We both failed each other. I want to be honest about that. This was not entirely your fault, and I was not entirely blameless. I chose silence when I should have chosen honesty. I chose performance when I should have chosen conversation. I made 30 breakfasts when what I actually needed was one real talk. But I also want to say this. The love I gave you in 10 years was real. Every breakfast, every carefully chosen outfit, every late-night worry about whether you saw me, whether you appreciated me, whether you were glad to have chosen me, all of it was real. It was not a trick or a performance or a transaction. It was me loving you the best way I knew how. I'm learning now to love you differently, loudly, honestly, with clear expectations and the willingness to say when those expectations aren't being met. I'm learning that's not demanding. That's just love with backbone. And I'm learning to love myself that same way. Loudly, honestly, without waiting for someone else to assign me my worth. I don't know exactly what our future looks like. I know it's not the same as it was. I think that's a good thing. But I want you to know, I don't regret fighting for us. I don't regret choosing you. I don't regret the hard years, even the hardest ones, because they made me someone I actually respect. I hope you see that person, Harper. I hope you keep choosing to see her, because she deserves to be seen. Sarah. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer where I kept things I wasn't ready to let go of. Then I went to check on Amara, sleeping soundly in her crib with her tiny fists curled under her chin, and I watched her breathe for a while in the dark. I thought, looking at her. You're going to know your worth from day one. I am going to make absolutely sure of that. Amara is 2 years old now. She is loud and opinionated and wildly, riotously curious about everything, and every single day with her is an adventure I didn't know I was capable of. She has her father's eyes and, I'm told, my stubbornness, which I choose to interpret as determination. Thank you very much. Harper and I are still in our arrangement. Him mostly there, me mostly here, but the texture of it has changed completely. The emotional distance that used to stretch between us across those 4 hours has narrowed. Not closed entirely. We are still two people who spent a decade building habits that weren't working, and those things take time. But narrowed. Genuinely. He calls every evening. He asks real questions. He notices things and says so. He told me last month that he thought I was the strongest person he knew, and he said it looking right at me, no fidgeting, no looking away. Like a man who had practiced saying true things out loud and was getting better at it. We are making plans, real ones, for eventually closing the geographical distance. The logistics are complicated, and it won't happen overnight. But it's on the table. It's a conversation we're having with intention instead of indefinitely deferring. My career is going beautifully. I was promoted earlier this year, team lead, with a significant salary jump that made me sit quietly in my car for 10 minutes after I got the news, just holding it. All those years of showing up for work the way I showed up for everything completely and without complaint, it had added up to something. Amara's college fund is growing. My therapy is ongoing, and probably will be for a while, because there is always more to learn, and I have decided that investing in my own clarity is as important as anything else I spend money on. Denise threw me a little party last spring, just a small group of our closest women, and said it was a celebration of Sarah finally realizing she's the main character. I laughed so hard I cried, but she wasn't wrong. I spent a long time living like I was a supporting character in someone else's story. Like my job was to make the space around other people more comfortable and beautiful, and to quietly shrink whenever I took up too much room. I am done with that. I am the main character of my own life. I always was. I just needed to remember it. So, here we are. If you've made it this far, and I hope you have, because this story was worth every minute, I want to leave you with something real. Not a quote. Not something cute to screenshot. Something true. If you are in a marriage or a relationship right now where you are working your hardest, giving your best, doing everything right, and you are still lonely, please hear me when I say this. Loneliness inside a relationship is not your fault. But staying silent about it? That's something you have the power to change. Your needs are not too much. Your desire to feel seen and appreciated and celebrated by the person who chose you. That is not high maintenance. That is human. That is basic. That is the whole point. And if you are the Harper in this story, if you have a person in your life who is working themselves to the bone trying to make you feel loved, and you are sitting in silence thinking they know, they just know, I need you to hear this. They don't know. Or if they know, they can't feel it. And a love they can't feel is a love that isn't reaching them. Say it out loud. Say it imperfectly. Say it awkward and fumbling and out of practice. Say it anyway, because the people we love deserve to feel it. Not assume it. Feel it. To every woman who has ever made 12 types of breakfast and gotten nothing back. To every woman who has dressed up and shown up and tried harder when what she needed was a conversation. To every woman who has swallowed her loneliness because she didn't want to seem too demanding. You are not too much. You are exactly enough. And you deserve a love that knows that. Now go remind yourself of that. And if this story moved you, if it touched something in you or made you think about your own life or someone you love, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button, because there are more stories coming. More truth. More of this. I'll see you in the next one.